Hello and welcome to the first edition of Baseball Talk with me, Scott, and
His dad, Mike.
yeah, who was that? If it's with your dad, we are breaking some
Yeah, he'd
news.
have to come back from somewhere else.
I would love to talk to Green Dad. I have a lot of questions.
Now, you want to talk baseball? If my dad
Yeah,
was around,
yeah, we have spent a lot of Saturdays chatting. I've said the story on here before. Watching either game of the week with him and Granny Joe, or watching the old black and white home run derbies was all with both of them, and listen to both of them have stories. But that was some. I got some great memories for that. With the on that. So yeah, but that's kind of funny. So we started a week of baseball. Did you get to see much baseball this weekend, Dad? Or I know
well,
we.
I saw some on opening day,
Uh huh.
um, and then I watched some of I'm a Nationals fan, so I watched Nationals games.
Right.
But I also was watching the men's and women's NCAA basketball tournament, so
Right.
that took me away from the baseball quite a bit because I was interested in that. So,
Right. Yeah.
but I
You're
did. But like
sports.
yesterday, I watched most of the Nationals game, and the young kid that they got from San Diego, the pitcher, he looked good. He looked real good.
Yeah, that would be
Grow or something.
Gore, I
Gore.
believe. He got the
Mackenzie
win.
Gore.
Yeah, he got the win yesterday. I'm looking at the score right now. So it was 4-1. Gore and Finnegan got the save. Schuster gets the loss for the Braves. So yeah, that Mackenzie Gore, uh, there are high hopes on him now. When he was with the Padres, he was a top prospect pitcher. That's why they traded for Soto for him and Abrams. That was the core of that trade. I'm trying to think of who.
Ruiz, they got from the Dodgers.
Right, but I'm talking about the core of the Soto trade. That they got a few players to replace him, so that was big trade. Because I ended up watching a lot of baseball this weekend.
Well, I wanted to see that they said I pulled it up on the side of my screen. It said the Mets game was on MLB. So I turned on MLB, and the Mets game was blacked out because it was being shown on a New York station. I'm going, I have no access to the New York station.
Well, that's that crazy baseball geography they have, and I'm great. That's a great topic, Dad. Good segue because that's one of the things that tears up people with this one. I have a friend that's a Nationals fan, and he can't get if he gets the MLB package, he can't watch Nationals games in Charlotte because it's a local team, and he has no way to watch the local games on this cable. That's something that MLB needs to address desperately. That's one of the problems. You want to speed up the game and get people to watch the games. Well, you have to do something with this MLB geography. And it's not the old school where they want you to go to the games. They want you to watch the telecast of your local channel so you watch their commercials and stuff. Well, just stream their local channel. When I watch the Mets games, people may not know this when you stream because you watch it on regular cable, you get their commercials. When I stream, it just says they're on commercial break. So I don't see any of the commercials. It just goes to a blue screen MLB commercial break. So why don't you just stream the commercials? If it's that big of a deal, I don't understand that. It may
See, what I
be
don't that confused me because I've watched other teams. All right, let's just say the Cardinals. If
uh-huh,
I see the Cardinals are on MLB, I turn on
right,
the Cardinals game. They're just streaming the Cardinals broadcast.
right,
And so when they go to commercial break, MLB shows their commercials in the commercial break instead of the local commercials from Chicago. And
right.
then, but it's that. But that's what I thought I was going to get with the Mets. and
Right.
then the game was blacked out. But now get this. I turned over back to MLB and they were in the seventh inning and the game was on. So in the first few innings, the game was blacked out. In the last few innings, the game was on. And I watched the end of the Mets game. I have no idea what happened. It
Yeah.
makes no sense.
Well, MLB, there and don't get confused now. MLB TV and MLB Network are two different things. They're two different entities. Both owned by the MLB, but they're two different things. So I have the baseball package, which is on the MLB television or whatever it's called. The MLB Network is the one that's on cable that shows games at night
And that's what
or
I
the weekends, right? I don't have MLB. I have Hulu for my cable, and I don't have. I miss. So ESPN no longer does as it looks like baseball tonight, and I don't have MLB in any. They don't provide it in any package for Hulu TV. So I have to do old. I have to. I say old school. I go on YouTube, and I just pick and choose which games that I want to see. MLB is on YouTube, the channel, so I could see some of the highlights of games if there was something that's big. Just like Trace Thompson hits 3 home runs with 8 RBIs. I was like, geez, this guy had a pretty good World Baseball Classic for Great Britain. He hasn't been heard of in, I don't know, 7 years. He came up as a huge prospect in the White Sox organization, and then he's hitting. He does that for the Dodgers. But then again, that's that Dodger. You put on that Dodger uniform, and all of a sudden you become superhuman or something. It's crazy.
and the Yankees used to do the same thing.
You're just it's all of a sudden.
Guy would hit 180 with the Cubs and go to the Yankees and hit 350. Well, I mean, the guy that played for the Cardinals, and his career was going downhill, and the Yankees got him last year, and for the first half of the season until he got hurt, he was hitting over 300.
Yeah, was that Piscotty or
no? It was
no, not Piscotty.
No,
I know who. I know who. Yeah,
I think he's with the Padres now.
Grew the mustache, and all of a sudden he could play ball. But then again, he was left-handed in New York, so that kind of helps. And they worked with him a little bit, tweaked, and that happens with some players. But yeah, that's one of those things. You get into those big situations, and you either live up to them, because Gallo didn't live up to it. He cried, and but he had a big game yesterday, Joey Gallo. But I was sitting here watching Tampa's had a great weekend. They're 4-0, which is not surprising. That's one of those teams that they remind me of the old Braves, where they have great pitching staff, like the coaching staff of minors and building pitchers. And if a pitcher goes there, if you're looking to be a pitcher to get better, you want to go to Tampa Bay Rays. They have the magic sauce there for pitching. So that they're going to be interesting to watch. They're always interesting to watch.
Well, they always do very well, but they have a very high. I mean, they've even been to the World Series, but it's just hard for them to get over the top because they don't have some of the big pop. They got pitching and defense, but they don't have the big pop, and sometimes that hurts you. Then on the other hand, there are some teams where the power hurts them because they strike out so much because they're always swinging.
Right. Well, that's that Yankees thing. I said it before on this year on my preview show. The Yankees seem to be built for a long season. They beat up on bad pitching. They just tear it up. But when they face good pitching, they have issues. Judge is the only one that does well because that dude could hit. I mean, he could probably hit, the greatest pitchers of all time. That guy can just hit. But with power, that dude can. He is the next. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets a triple crown. He's kind of built like Miguel Cabrera in that way. But anyway, that team, when it comes to good pitching, we've seen in the last two playoffs, they have struggles and really. And last year, Judge had struggles in the playoffs, and they didn't do squat. They won the first one and struggled through it, and then they got beat up by the Astros. So I don't think did they even win a game. I think the Astros lost their first game in the World Series in the playoffs last year. So Astros right now, I haven't really watched any of them.
I've seen some of the Astros. I saw a little bit of the Astros games. They're the Astros.
Yeah, they're 2-2. Now, to me, it's Astros. To me, watching them is kind of bland. How's that to you? Is it? Years you always find teams that are exciting to watch. I remember that one year you're like, man, you need to watch the Brewers. They're just fun to watch. They run all the time. They're just all over the place. The Astros to me are kind of the opposite of that. I don't like Minute Maid Stadium. I just don't know.
Yeah, I don't like the ballpark, but they're at a point where they just go about their business. It's like somebody going to work. Instead of playing a game, they go to work, and with Dusty Baker as the manager, they keep an even keel. You lose 3 or 4 games in a row, he says, "So what? It's April,"
Right.
He's proven that everywhere he's gone. He's a great manager to play for because he doesn't get too high and he doesn't get too low. So that's the way the team plays. They play and they're efficient. They play good defense. They have decent pitching. They don't strike out a lot. And so over the long haul, like they're 2-2 now. So wow, people say they're 2-2.
Right.
That's not being 0-4. I mean,
Right.
to me, the team that's gotten off to a little slow start is the Phillies.
That was going to be my next. The Texas Rangers swept them. I believe that was the only sweep of the weekend. Tampa 3-0. Minnesota's 3-0. Texas is 3-0. So we had a couple of sweeps there. Yeah. So Texas, that was shocking to me. Texas beating them in 3, but that's baseball. I mean,
well, the Phillies had a big lead in the first game, and Texas scored 9 runs in the 4th inning.
Yeah.
That doesn't say a whole lot for Philadelphia's bullpen. And the other bullpen that really was bad this weekend was Baltimore.
Right. Yeah. That I was going to ask you because Baltimore's another local channel team that you get to watch. I watched a little bit of I listened to it on the radio. Game 1. I'm really looking forward to watching that young team this year. I think they're going to be a 500 team, but they're going to do it without. I mean, they scored a lot of runs this weekend. They just can't.
Yeah, they scored runs, but they couldn't. They almost blew the lead on the first game. They won 10-9. They did blow the lead in the second game. Of course, they would have won if the left fielder would have played like a little leaguer and caught the ball with 2 hands instead of trying to one-hand it and dropped it. And the next guy hits a home run. That's the way it works. The catcher
drops telling that story a lot nicer than
a home run.
Yesterday. yeah. That and when you have bad pitching, you got to have awesome defense to back it up. And really, they do have awesome defense, but sometimes you have those mental letdowns, and they're not allowed to have those right now. They're not good enough to overcome those. We've talked about that in the past. You got to be good to overcome any plays like that, and Orioles just can't do that right now.
They're not capable.
Right.
They're not at that point yet.
Yeah, and they will in their future. I think they're missing a couple of good pitchers. I think their rookie is going later in his next couple of games, like Grayson Rodriguez, I think. I'm kind of looking for him to pitch. I don't think he's pitched yet. When I was looking at box scores, I did not see much of the late game box scores or the 4:00 games yesterday. I was right busy for just around the house doing stuff. But I've been watching a lot of. I watch a lot of Padres. I watched 2 of the Padres get parts of 2 of their games and 1 of the Angels games. Padres, their hitting is just kind of. You would think with that lineup, my God, they would just the ball would be flying all over the park. Haven't really seen that yet from them. But you know it's coming. That lineup is just so stacked. When they get
Well, most people are picking the Padres to probably win be in the National League, represent the National League in the World Series.
well, the only reason I don't do that is because they're short on the pitching side of things. I think there's the Dodgers lineup is just as good, not as stacked, but they have a good lineup too. But they
The Dodgers this year the last 2 years they've been shedding some of but they were way over the salary cap, whatever you call it, the luxury tax in MLB. They're way over it. Now they're shedding it like crazy because they want to pay $600 million to Ohtani. They want to make he's going to get the $550 million, $600 million contract after this season's over, and they want to be in the bidding.
Right.
So they figure it'd be between them and the Yankees and the Mets.
Right. That's going to be the off-season war. Is well, you're also kind of waiting to see who's going to come up with the trade deal at the trade deadline with the Angels. But the Angels, they could be not trading if they have a good first half of the year. Everybody.
If you have Trout, Ohtani, and Rendon hitting back to back to back, that's not a bad middle of the lineup.
Well, and then they got other parts. I mean, their actually lineup is pretty darn good. If they can get any type of pitching whatsoever, they're going to be in that situation at the trade deadline at a situation where do we trade or do we buy or not do anything and just try to get into the playoffs? Because, if you get in the playoffs, we've seen it. The Phillies didn't have a great season. They make it to the playoffs, and they make a run, and they get to the World Series. So,
the Nationals won the World Series after having a losing record past the All-Star game.
Right, and you have to get in to win. That's just it. And in baseball, baseball is such a team sport and depth sport. It's not really like other sports. Like NFL, you only got to win when you get to the playoffs. It's 4 games, right? 4 games you have to win a series in baseball. Basketball, you just need some scores. It's just set up a little bit different. Where if you get into the playoffs, into the tournament, as I like to call it, things can fall your way. You can have all it takes is your pitchers to be on, and everybody to be focused and have perfect games, and it can happen or close to fielding and all that stuff, and play a team game and how you're built, because there's short run teams and then long run, and I don't think the Padres' first 2 or 3 pitchers are built for the playoffs as well as the Dodgers are, but that's my opinion. I think the Padres will probably them and the Dodgers will be fighting for who gets to 100 wins first. But that's my opinion on that. Let's see what else. Anything else in big games or plays or anything catch your eye for me?
One thing I noticed was there were a lot of teams that showcased some younger players that I hadn't really paid much attention to. I found out that the Orioles are ranked number 1 with their farm system, and so that they're still building, and they've got a tremendous young nucleus on that field. They are the catcher, and they're just loaded. And right. then you have other young teams that look promising. The problem is they'll be promising until contracts come up, and then they can't compete with the big boys when they throw the money around. That's right. Yeah, we've talked about some of the teams like Pittsburgh. The Pirates, if you look, they've got Endy Rodriguez and Henry Davis and Mike Burrows and Quinn Priester, who are young players. Probably they've sent some of them back down to AAA. But when they get up there, when they start playing well, once their contract is up, and somebody will come swooping in and offer them, $35 million a year, and Pittsburgh won't be able to match it.
Yeah.
Oakland can't match it. Kansas City can't match it.
Right.
These A team like Cleveland, who always has great pitching, it seems like, and great defense, here again, they don't score a lot of runs because once they get most of their players up to where they can pay them, they can only pay one or two.
Right.
Where the big teams, I mean, look what the Mets did this year. They stocked up, and
Yeah.
that's
And
the Padres have stocked up.
and to me, the Mets spent money but did it poorly. The guy they spent a lot of money on is already on IL. So I called it, called my shot, and so I was like, which one's going to be the first one? And Verlander was the first one. I don't know if it was like if that was a betting line in Vegas, it should have been. Before we get into our end of our big topic, I did see a play that I like to Renfroe for the Angels. I think it's going to be a huge pickup as well in the lineup and outfield. He made a bad play, but made a heck of a catch.
Yeah, he caught the ball without looking at it.
Right, he just threw up his glove and it made it there. That was amazing. I just wanted to talk. I think Renfroe has been good everywhere he's been. He's not an all-star, but he's just one of those guys that does his job. He'll bat, 250-ish, 260-ish, drive in 70 runs and, hit 25 home runs. And in that lineup, that's all you're asking. My question, though, to you, did you have any Angel Hernandez moments of bad umpiring? I'm going to have this as a section every week. I just kind of want to spring it on you this week.
Actually, the games I watched, except for a very few bad calls on strikes or balls, I thought the umpiring was exceptional the first weekend. I mean, it just, of course, I didn't see Hernandez behind the plate or what's the name of the other guy he gets back there and he acts like he doesn't know where the strike zone is.
Right.
I can't think of his name, but I didn't see either one of them behind the plate, so I can't. I'll have to see him behind the plate before I pass judgment on it. But the ones I did see, for the most part, they did a pretty good job.
Yeah, I didn't see when they don't make any highlight reels. Now, one I did, I wrote it down. It was the Crawford at bat for the Mariners game. The umpire, which drives me crazy, they'll talk about it, but in the media, but they won't name the umpire. It's like naming the umpire, then everybody knows. But his name was Mark Carlson behind the plate, just to let everybody know. Krenchik throws a ball, it gets foul tipped into the mitt, and they call it non-swing ball 4 and walking. It was plainly plain, but you can't. That's a non-reviewable play, believe it or not. You have technology, you put it in and then say, well, we can't review that one. That one we can't review. And the umpire, I don't know how the other 3 umpires missed it in the field. I guess they didn't even ask. I did see that one. Then of course, they go on and win the game after that. The next guy hits a home run. So that's the type of play. That was my only moment. I kind of want to have an Angel Hernandez moment every week, and hopefully I can have some montages or something up for.
Well, if you wanted to see poor officiating, all you had to do was watch the women's finals of the basketball. That was one of the worst officiated games in any sport that I've seen in 77 years on this planet.
They've listed the refs' names, and I think the NCAA and Iowa was looking into what was going on there last night. Real quick, this might be something. LSU looked like that had the coach was getting her way. She'd call the refs over and tell them, hey, that girl's throwing her elbow, and then all of a sudden they throw it in the next play down. It's penalty. Penalty foul. And
real quick, they called a technical foul on the Clark girl when she just threw the ball behind her back towards the sideline, the baseline, when they were going back to the huddle. They called a technical foul on her. Kim Mulkey ran out on the court, bumped into the referee. The referee had to take her by the arm and walk her back to the bench. She pulled her arm away from the referee, and they didn't call anything.
Right. Yeah, I
I mean,
saw
if she spent half the night on the court. Of course, that's the way she coaches. People that don't know her, I've been watching women's basketball for years, and that she does that when she was at Baylor. She was famous for it. She
right,
was famous. She won a national title there with
right,
Brittany Griner, and she was famous for it.
right.
And screaming and hollering at the refs, going out on the court. You know, if the refs let her do it, but why do you call a technical foul on the other team for throwing the ball behind her back toward the referee at the sideline, and you're not going to call a technical foul on the coach putting her hands on a referee, bumping into a referee?
Yeah, I mean
That's
that.
I mean that's just an example, but
Well, I mean that happened in a preseason game, a spring training baseball game with Real Muto, just trying to get the ball from the umpire. The umpire takes a few minutes, so Real Muto moves his glove, thinking he's throwing it back to the pitcher, and he makes the umpire look stupid, and the umpire throws him out the game. that I mean that refs and umpires, they got to get over their egos a little bit.
well,
I like
when an official in any sport, when the officials in any sport make the game about them instead of
right.
about the game and the players, you have a real problem.
Yeah.
And I've seen plate umpires, they will get back there and make a few bad calls, and then when the pitcher or the catcher says something, then they want to throw people out of the game. They rip off their mask and start chewing people out. I mean,
They'll start going after the players themselves.
yeah,
Okay.
I, I umpired high school baseball and high school softball for 3 years, and then off and on I umpired slow pitch softball for 20. So I know all about. I've made bad calls. I've had coaches get after me, but I never tried to show up a coach. Never.
Well, we'll get back on the baseball. You touched on it about the Pirates. I started on my preview in the preseason. Me and you talked about it, and we're going to pick a team every week and kind of talk about that team. Not really a breakdown, but we're going to talk about Pirates and the history the Pirates have. We were talking about it a little bit yesterday. They've been established since 1882 as a baseball team, and been in the National League since 1887. So you have this team that has a historic just the history is just. I mean, I'm looking at 5 World Series, 9 pennants, just Eastern divisional titles, wild card berths. Their last one was in 2015. This is such a great, historically rich team. The players they've had, I mean, it's just phenomenal. When you look at the players, let's see, just retired players: Ralph Kiner, Willie Stargell, Bill Mazeroski, Paul Weiner, Danny, what's this? Murtaugh, coach
Danny
manager.
Murtaugh.
Yeah,
Danny Murtaugh was their manager.
played second base as well. Hornus Wagner,
Honest Wagner, yeah.
Clemente, trainer. That's their retired numbers. And then when you start looking at just Hall of Famers, Wade Hoyt, Joey Kelly, George Kelly. I mean, I know these names. And
when I was a kid,
history, Willie Stargell, Dave Parker.
That was in the 70s. That was in the 70s when they were really good.
Well, that decade where the Braves were battling, their arch nemesis for a part of the first half of that was the Pirates.
Yeah, that was in the 90s.
Yeah,
in the early 90s.
You got Jim Bunning, Bert Blyleven. I mean, I'm sitting here just seeing these names. It's just like you sit here and you wonder, as a Pirates fan, do you live in the past? Are you wishing for a better future? You have probably the nicest ballpark in baseball, and you have an owner that just looks like he's okay with being less than mediocre, and just wants to make a payday. What is your thoughts on this franchise and where it's at right now?
Well, I mean, when I was young and listening to games on the radio before we had a television, I used to listen to they were all day games, and or 90% of them were day games. And I heard some of the Pirates games, and I remember Ralph Kiner, and I had his baseball card at one time, and he was fantastic.
Mhm.
And then I was in ninth grade in 1960, and the Yankees and the Pirates played in the World Series. That was the World Series. Bill Mazeroski hit the home run that won the seventh game over the Yankees, and that was the Pirates team that had a young Clemente, but they had Bill Verdon and Dick Groat and
Dick
Bob and Bob Friend was one of the pitchers, and I mean they had a very very good team then. And then the late '60s, and then in '71 they won the series again, and then in '79. And in '71 is when they started with Manny Sanguillen and Stargell and that bunch.
Mhm.
And then they were nearing the end of their career in '79, 8 years later, and they won it again. And then it was like after that, it took them a long time to get back up there. And then they had Bobby Bonilla and that bunch in the early '90s, Barry Bonds, and what was Andy Van Slyke in center field.
Mhm.
And the Braves they'd been independent, but they had to fight tooth and nail to beat the Pirates in the playoffs every year
Right.
for about 2 or 3 years. And then Bonds and all them went to the highest bidder. And Bonilla and he went to Miami. They left and went to Miami, and then the Marlins won the World Series with that super team. And then that owner got rid of all those players.
Right.
So because he got his trophy in the office, but
Right.
it's a lot of it is every professional sport has elite teams. Then they have a middle group, and then they have a bunch that just stay. They're bottom feeders, I call them, and they just stay there. I think the Pirates and the Oakland A's, Kansas City just won a World Series a few years ago, but you'd never know it. And of course, now the Nationals are horrible. But I mean, it's just these teams. The problem with the Nationals, quickly, they don't have their ownership's in limbo. He's been
Right.
trying to sell the team for 3 years. He doesn't have a bidder, so they're kind of stuck in limbo until they get an owner. But the Pirates owner will not pay big money for anybody, and
You won't pay middle money. I mean,
it's like he's satisfied. He makes enough money off the local television contract and out of the people coming to the ballpark that he makes a nice living. And I mean, he's one of the owners that the ball team is not. I don't think that's his main livelihood. I think he's a business owner, and so that's kind of like a hobby to him. That's a problem. And then if you get real good players, I'm not saying there are a lot of teams in both leagues that will not be able to be in a bidding war for Ohtani. They cannot afford a $500 million contract.
Yep.
There's a lot of teams. There's only 3 or 4 that can. But I'm not saying going after Ohtani.
right.
I'm saying when you got a couple of young players, their young shortstop, that kid at shortstop, that long-rangey shortstop they got,
Mm-hmm.
have you seen that kid play? That young man can play. He can play. And
Is that O'Neill Cruz?
Yes. When his contract is up, if he keeps improving and improves every year, he strikes out a little bit, but he's getting better every year. And he's a great defensive player. When he gets to the end of his career, give him a contract. I mean, just keep one guy. I mean, that's why there's about 2 or 3 players on the team that have been there a little while. They wanted to be traded because they knew they couldn't win.
Right.
They
Well,
wanted
for
to go
Brian
on.
Hayes, they did give a little bit of a contract, but it wasn't anything huge. I think they're talking to Brian Reynolds right now.
Well, the Reynolds is the one who wants to be traded.
I don't blame him. That's a talent that I would like to see on another team because I think he's just tired of playing there. I think he needs to some life blown into him before for the end of his career, so we can see the best of him. I'm sitting here looking at their active roster. They're 40 man, active and inactive, and it's a lot of great young talent, like you're saying. But when you start looking for the pieces that make the veterans, you just don't see it. I mean, like I was talking to Mike and them. Mike and my friend Ed that are Philly fans, they're mad because they live in Pennsylvania and their tax money went to help build the stadium that they play this form of 4A baseball at. And they made a big deal out of signing Vince Velasquez as a pitcher was their big off-season signing. And he is, I don't even know if he's the number one pitcher on their team, but he wouldn't be a number one on probably any other team, much less a number three. So when you don't even try to get, and you know they have money to like sign at least a pretty good guy to solidify the lineup a little bit. I mean, they make trades and still don't have a great minor league system. You would think with the trades that they make, offloading these players, that they would have the number one minor league system year in and year out, and having the top, your top 5 on draft picks. Now they do the lottery, so they'll be in the top 5 probably every year in draft picks, at least the top 10. They just, to me, I think Major League Baseball really does need to step in. And do something. I don't know. They try to make these rules where people got to be competitive and all this stuff. But you have owners like my guy, New York, that comes in and he wants to win so badly. He wants to bring a World Series or, the championship to the Mets organization. And you have other owners that don't have the money like Oakland, but are willing to figure out ways to at least be competitive. This guy, I don't know.
Well, that Pittsburgh, Cincinnati in the same division. Cincinnati's another team that doesn't do anything. Mean, look what they did last year. They traded their left fielder to the Phillies. They have a real good ball player, but they don't want to pay him, so they trade him to the Phillies. Mm-hmm. The only person they pay is Joey Votto. So, they do the same thing. There's a lot of these. There's quite a few of these teams. They talk about Billy Ball in Oakland, but Oakland hasn't done anything in the last 10 years. You
can look at the Reds and go, when they trade, they're getting pieces for future. And I feel like they're like a lot of teams. The A's kind of started it with, okay, this is how you build a team. But the Astros showed you how to build a team in the A's fashion with a little bit of money. You don't need a lot of money. You just need a little bit. Stockpile your minor league and develop. And you have to use the international sources. So that's the blueprint for the future, which I think I've been saying all along. The Orioles are using that blueprint right now. But I just think the Pirates, something needs to be done. I feel bad for Pirates fans. They don't deserve this. As much as I'm not a Pittsburgh fan of anything, I just think I love when you see a historical team with that much history just not be relevant and just.
Well, do they have a rule in Major League Baseball that says that a team has to use a certain percentage of its revenue on its payroll?
I think they started that rule, not revenue, but the money if they get money from the luxury tax. So the tax that the teams pay, which some teams like the Yankees are trying to stay under desperately, and some other teams, but like the Mets and the Dodgers found out, hey, that's probably not the best way of doing things. And I think the
Padres are too.
What's that?
Padres are
way over. The Mets are over. You got teams that are over, and they pay the tax. Well, that tax gets divvied up, and the Pirates get a large portion of that, and they're not spending it on ball players. And I think that's where we're starting to see some of these contracts, because I think they do have to spend. I think they made that into the competitive clause when they wanted these teams to be competitive. But I'm almost to the point where, the owners can get together and vote an owner out. And I'm almost at, I don't know if the other owners are like, well, no, let's keep them there because it's a great place to get a 4A player or a good major league player to fill out my roster late in the year in case of injury or whatever. And the Royals are not using this pattern. The Royals are building within. I talked to somebody last night. I think the Royals, you brought them up a couple times, and we'll bring them up in the future. I think they got a good young club with some future in it. I just don't. When you look at the Pirates, I don't see a future. You don't see where they're going. You don't see a plan. And yes, they can't sign everyone, but you have to be creative in those situations. Tampa Bay does it just fine.
Yeah, Tampa Bay is the outlier, and the other team that does a good job of it's been a pretty large market, but they handle their money well. Is Atlanta.
Yeah,
the Atlanta Braves have signed up their young shortstop, their young right fielder, their young center fielder, the first baseman they got from the A's. All those guys are signed up for a few years now. They've signed them up to play for them. They have locked up some of their key players. Now all they have to do is get that third baseman locked up.
And that's going to be a chunk of change because that dude's
explain to me why they haven't paid
Austin Riley is the future, but we'll talk about the Braves on another day. With the Pirates, I just, I feel bad when I look at, you got Brian Hayes, O'Neill Cruz. You had those two guys. Austin Hedges at one point was a great career, but now he's their catcher. I see a team, I see some names, and I just don't see anything. I wish Brian Reynolds good luck. They got Andrew McCutchen back for his going away song, which he deserves it. Andrew McCutchen is a great player, and it was great for the game.
And he was the face of the franchise for a while.
Was the face of the franchise, and he was a hell of a center fielder. I've seen with some great plays. Let's see, some series starting today. Again, I'm looking. We talked about this last week. Just Washington's playing Tampa Bay. Philly, New York. Okay, Philly's at New York starting today.
The Yankees or the Mets?
Yankees, Phillies. I know my Philly friends are not looking forward to that after the Rangers, but you just got swept by the Rangers. I think they need to make a statement or do something there. Speaking of Pittsburgh, they're playing Boston at Boston. Atlanta at St. Louis. There's your series for the next three right there. That's going to be a good one. Baltimore at Texas. Detroit at Houston. Arizona at San Diego, which Arizona is not playing bad right now.
No, Arizona is another team with a lot of good young players. They have really they're good young players, and that's you just have to nurture them. I mean, you don't know what you're going to get. Like the Orioles, you don't know what you're going to get from game to game because there's got so many kids out there.
Right. Well, the Angels are playing Seattle, so we'll see what the Angels have in that series as well.
I picked Seattle to win the American League.
Right. Now, before we go, I'm going to put you on the spot. Who is your so you picked Seattle to win the American League, so that's
I picked Seattle to come out of the American League. It's too easy to pick the Yankees. Anybody can pick the Yankees.
I didn't pick the Yankees. Who's your National League World Series?
The National League World Series champion is hard because you got. I mean, the National League to me is like the AFC in football. You got a bunch of good teams, but I'm going to go. I was going to go with the Phillies, but their bullpen looks shaky because I figured when they got Harper back with that lineup, and then they lost Hoskins too for the year. So that really hurt them. So I kind of fell off from the Phillies. In the National League, if they get to pitching, the Cardinals.
That's it. That's
They
not.
got the best first baseman and the best third baseman in the league.
By
So
far.
if they
Not by
get
far.
if they get
Nolan Arenado and Austin
if they get
Riley.
pitching, they'll be. And of course, I mean, I could sit here and say my two picks are the two teams that are the healthiest at the end of the year.
Right. Well, you can't say that.
But you can't
and
say
also, the Cardinals have the best management in sports, I think, from head coach all the way through. They just seem to always be on the same page, and that's not my pick. I'm sticking with my preview, the rematch, Astros Phillies. I just think, the metal and rocks form the sharpest edge, and I think that's what the National League East is. Whatever team comes out in National League East is going to be prepared for the playoffs.
exactly. And I agree with that. And that's why I was favoring the Phillies until injuries and then their bullpen against Texas, they looked pretty good in the last game, but the first two games they were awful.
Right. And I just think the Astros are still so good in American League, which is kind of not weak, but they're not the strongest. And I think their biggest rivalry is going to be winning their own division against the Mariners. I think they're built better than the rest of the teams for the playoffs. So that is episode 1 in the books. Thank you, Dad. This is hopefully something we can do unless life interrupts for reasons. On Mondays, we'll just talk baseball. We'll talk about a team. We'll break it down in our own unique fashion of just bad mouthing and making fun of them. This is a little insight on our weekly conversations on the phone. Last night was more we were watching the game kind of together, but separately while we were talking. The LSU and Iowa. Again, congratulations to LSU. I'm not taking anything away from them.
No, they scored 102 points.
Yeah,
they scored 102 points.
Right, and congratulations, and I hope my Hawkeye fans are not too hurt. You got to get there, and congratulations for getting there and having an awesome season and having fun getting
and
there.
Keep this in mind, Caitlin Clark comes back next year.
She's talking about walking away. I was reading something last night, going to the WNBA, but I wouldn't understand.
Well, she's not eligible. She's can't go in the NBA. Under their rules, she's got one more year. She can't do it until after next year. She's a junior, and she has to play so many years before she can. I read about it yesterday. There's some of the girls, they don't have what the men have, a one and done and all that stuff. They've got to play a certain number of years, and their class has to graduate or something before they're eligible to go into the WNBA. And they said she wasn't eligible until after next year.
All right. Well, we'll leave it with that. Until next time, please keep us on your schedule. I don't know. I'm not going to exactly know when I'm going to release these on Monday. Me and him are going to record them in the morning, and then I'll just release them sometime during the day. So be looking for them. Just something fun. And if you will, leave comments, questions below, and we'll talk about them on the next episode. And welcome to the father and son of getting baseball right.
Yeah.
In our minds. So until next time, we'll see you.